What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to ICNV Drivers Edition. Really quick, I'm going to get into a video. There was some more Z06 information released. This is about allocations and supply chain constraints. So let's talk about it. Let's get into this video. I was out on Friday evening. I actually met this guy, and that's why I decided to start vlogging more, but realistically there was nothing special about his car, so I don't think I would even include this in the vlog, or had no idea I should record the conversation. But I was out with my friend. We were discussing some investment opportunities because right now my portfolio isn't looking that great. You know, the stock market is down and not in my favor. My portfolio is probably down about 10-12 grand, and that's something I just can't easily and readily sit by and accept. So we were discussing some more investment opportunities, and I was leaving from this dinner or this meeting. Ran to a guy outside who had a C4, I believe C5 Corvette. Those, I just don't really know off the top of my head. I believe it was a C5 Corvette. But that's not the importance of this conversation. We started talking about his next Corvette purchase, and he admired my Zeus Bronze C8, which you all know Zeus. So he commented on Zeus, and then he went on to tell me that, you know, the craziness of the market doesn't allow him to even consider getting a C8 right now. So he's targeting probably a C7 Grand Sport or a C7 Z06 because he's trying to keep his costs down. And I think the funny thing about that is just we got to talk about that marketplace, and I do have a video coming out about the C7 Z06 marketplace now that the C8 Z06 information has been released. And like I was explaining to him, it's kind of crazy that an 8-year-old car at this point is kind of retailing for $2,000 below MSRP when you could have bought those cars back in the day with $5,000, $6,000, and up to $9,000 off with rebates. So this marketplace is truly crazy, but I think it's like it's developing a new normal because I just don't see those type of rebates ever coming back, at least no time in the near future. Just sorry to say that. But that wasn't the focus of this video or the focus of our conversation either. The focus of our conversation was he asked me what did I think about the supply chain constraints and the information that was just released, or the memo that was released about the C8 Z06 on Thursday. And honestly, I knew nothing about it. So I really can't be mad because, you know, I hadn't heard from my contact, but at the same point in time, when I did reach out to him, he just told me they were actually busy with car sales. It hadn't been that busy in a while. And he meant to give me a call and talk about it, but it kind of slipped his mind, and I can understand. Like I said, it's not his job to keep me up to date with the latest information. I don't work for Chevy. I don't work for GM. I don't sell cars for either one of them. So everything he does for me is literally a courtesy and based on our friendship, our history, and our relationship. So I'm not mad at him for not dropping that information. But in one aspect of it, the memo came out and there was really nothing new to it in the respect that no allocations were released. But what we did know is what we had already talked about before. So if you haven't seen my video about the workbench, you might want to check that out. GM pulled some orders and they went to 3,000 status, which that's cool. we kind of predicted that, or we expected that to happen, because like I said before, and there's actually an article out on it by a Corvette blogger. So if you actually read the article, pretty much he talks about what I've been hinting about for the past year and a half, that GM pulled workbench orders based off customer bills on their cars. And the one key factor in it is that a lot of vehicles that were pulled or sent to 3000 status, and this is why it's key to me, I just refuse to come out and say what this option is, because I don't want to drive the market into a frenzy. But a lot of cars that had this one particular option were pulled. Now, not every car that had this option was pulled, but I think the key factor in that too is that the cars that were pulled from dealers with this option that usually don't get a lot of allocations. So that's something you may want to pay attention to. But like I said, if you do a little research, you can find this information out on your own. I don't feel like this is the video to release that information. But at the same point in time, in my workbench video, we pretty much discussed how this was going to play out and what was going to happen from it, and exactly what we talked about happened. So there are several cars that have actually been pulled, or their orders have been pulled and they're assigned. They're at 3000 status, which are showing a production week sometime in September. So one thing that came out this week, and expect to see some C8 Z06 Corvettes delivered to customers probably early October. So with that information coming out, that was nothing new. But what's now is the surprising factor, and this is what's very key to me, and I have to laugh at this, is that GM announced that the allocations for the Z06 will be based off the amount of 3LT vehicles that were sold by a dealership from 2020 to 2022. Now, why do I find this funny? Because I sat back and watched, and I listened to it so many times. I've been to Corvette events, car shows, and people say, you an idiot for buying a 3LT. Well, all these people that criticize people for buying a 3LT and told them they didn't need to buy a 3LT, your allocation status now depends on all the 3LTs that were sold. Now, if that isn't a devil's advocate, I don't know what is, because now all of a sudden the 3LTs, which many people criticized, and I don't understand why people criticized a nicer production vehicle, but honestly I got a very good clue, and we can talk about that in a later video. But now that the 3LTs are dictating the C8 Z06 allocations, you can expect to see some really different changes going forward, and I think you already see it as of now. Now, the one thing I will sit there and say about all of this is that I don't believe the C8, ZR1, the Zora, and the other cars are really going to be that big of a draw, because I don't think the everyday Joe expects to actually own those type of vehicles. So when I say this to you is, we've seen a lot of dealers renege on the wait list for a Z06. And with this information coming out, you can expect to see a lot more of that, or at least going after 2020, I would say 4, or maybe into the 2024 production, you're probably going to see more dealers say they're not going to do lists going forward. Because GM has just came out and said a new precedence. And the new precedence is that based off the amount of 3LTs that was sold will determine how many allocations you get. And I stopped at a dealership when I heard the information just to get a little bit more clarification on where it took place, because my contact hadn't quite updated me yet. And what was funny was the dealer I stopped at usually gets about 20 to 30 C8s a year. So altogether, you can say they probably had 68 C8s between 2020 and 2022 so far. And now the interesting thing about it is, because they have been letting customers order cars, and the area there which they're located everybody's not trying to pay top dollar for a car. So the reason why this is interesting is because they believe they would at least get a fair amount of Z06s based off the fact in the past they were able to get more Z06s than base cars when the Z06 finally came out. So they were hoping for that type of play going forward. But so when I stopped there and started talking to the salesman, which I had been there before, I just wanted to see had their list down, got any smaller since the actual reveal had came out, and was there possibly a chance for me to get a car now a lot sooner. But what he told me was it may actually be a lot worse than what they were projecting, because in the previous years they were able to get a certain amount of Z06 allocations, which in some cases they were able to get more Z06s than they were able to get base cars, which they were hoping that trend would carry over. But when they now say it's going to be based off the 3LT sales, now they're like, well, wait a minute, because for 2020 they only sold 2 3LTs. For 2021 they sold a total of 5 3LTs, and I believe for 2022 they sold 5 or 6 3LTs. So overall they've pretty much sold 12 3LTs in 3 years out of 60 cars. And if you're telling them their allocation is going to be based off 12 cars, you're starting to realize that, so if they stick to 25% of the production, they may see only 2 cars. If they go to half the production, they may see 6. So it's really interesting now because, well, they were counting on a minimum of 5 Z06s per year, hoping to get somewhere around 7 or 8. So when they have a list that's over 30 people deep, and they were telling people, yeah, probably 3 to 4 years if you were at the end of their list, and they were actually still going to sell their allocation to the highest bidder, that just changed. And I'm betting right now a lot of these dealers that thought they were going to get a large amount of allocations are getting a wake-up call. And I say that to you because there have been several smaller dealers that people kind of forgotten about that ordered nothing but 3LTs. There have been some small dealers that may have only gotten 5 or 6 allocations, that only every allocation was a 3LT. I even got reached out to by the dealership that I reached out to. There's a very small dealership who said, you know, they may not see a C8 Z06 until 2024 or a 2024 model year, and even then they say they may get 2 or 3. Just based off the fact that, you know, they're not a large Chevy volume pusher, but now all of a sudden this dealership that sold 8 C8s and all of them were 3LTs feel like they may have a chance of getting the Z06 the first year. So it's funny how things play out. That's all I can say to you, is that it is so funny how things play out. And what's even more funny is this dealership that I'm talking to you about didn't even take a deposit, because they wasn't expecting any car. They just wrote down a list and said, hey, we'll reach out if we happen to get lucky and so forth. And they reached out to me. So like I said, this is going to be some interesting territory, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds. So from what I'm being told, more information is coming this coming week, and we should get more specifics around the allocations. But again, a 3LT, your 3LT sales are supposed to dictate how many Z06 allocations that come from this. But my main thing behind all of this is 3LTs, if you look at it, were about a third of all Corvette sales. A third. And there's a rumor it's only going to be a certain percent of 3LT sales that gets the allocation. So if you look at it, and I just do for rounding purposes, there were 30,000 3LTs made between 2020 and 2022 model years, and a third of that would be 10,000. So I don't think you're going to hear GM come out and say they're going to make 35% of those productions. If they do, people will be happy, because you will be looking somewhere right around 10,000 cars being made for the 2023 model year. If it sticks closer to the trend of 25%, you're going to be looking somewhere right around 7,500 cars. So even though people saying the C8 Z06 is going to be mass produced, it's leaning more towards 7,000 cars for a model year. Possibly, if you go half of production, which I think that would be a blessing, that'd be 15,000 cars, and that's what most people were hoping for. I don't think you're going to get 50% of 3LT production are going to be C8 Z06s. So the more and more we have this conversation, the more it becomes that these numbers are going to be far less than what everybody's hoping for. Well, we can talk about this in the next video, but until then, stay blessed, stay safe, and I'll see you in these streets. Peace.